it's so important for me to speak up because there are so many people that can't advocate and can't speak up because they're not here today. And I feel this sense of responsibility of being that voice for people. When I was younger, I did feel alone. I didn't think anyone my age struggled with their mental health, but I was quick to realize that a lot of us struggle, but we were too afraid to talk about it. And that's why it's so important sharing my story in schools and the community, showing them that, they're not alone. But especially with the younger kids of here I am today, and that light at the end of the tunnel is so important because when someone, especially, for me on my darkest days, when you're in that hole, you can't see the light at the tunnel, reach out to the person that they feel that may need the help. Let them know that they're not alone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Stephanie Marie, and I'm on a mission to spread hope, sharing people's stories to encourage, inspire, and empower you. And today, I'm so excited to welcome Georgie D'Avanzo, who's the Outreach and Development Associate at NAMI Westchester. That stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the nation's largest grassroots nonprofit organization. And so I'm so excited to speak with you today, Georgie. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I'm really excited to learn more about your journey and hear about your story. I know we talked about you're a mental health and brain tumor advocate, and so I'd really love to hear a little bit about your journey, your story, and how that led you to where you are today.
When I was 5 years old, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And as you can imagine, I was very young. So I don't remember a whole lot. But, what my parents have told me, I had really bad headaches. I was passing out. I was screaming. I was running, I think, crazy fevers. I just was not acting like myself. And going back to the importance of advocating, my parents had advocated for me and, made sure that every test was being done to make sure that I was okay because they knew I wasn't acting like myself. But I am very, very lucky where I was able to have the brain tumor surgically removed. It was the size of a golf ball, which is crazy to think in a 5-year-old's little pea brain what a golf ball looks like.
That's terrible.
It was really the unknown. They didn't know if I was going to need chemo. They didn't know if I was going to need radiation. They didn't know if I was going to have to shunt in my brain. And, the biggest thing of all is like you're dealing with the brain, so anything could happen. Where my brain tumor was located was kind of like by your cerebellum, which is really like your balance, which is fortunately the only side effect that I still have today is that, my balance is really bad. They didn't know if like what the grade would be, if it was going to be extremely bad. So when I was first diagnosed, they thought I had, worst case possible. And I ended up being almost best case possible. So I'm very fortunate, to be here today and just to have to do those routine MRIs and check-ins. But, my balance is the only thing that I really have an issue with today. And I am just so lucky to be where I am today because I could have been worst case possible. And I'm very, again, lucky that I'm just here today. But when I was younger in elementary school, my parents, had told us that they were getting a divorce. And as a kid, it's really hard to hear that. You definitely think it's the end of the world. And being the oldest, I definitely found myself taking on what I like to call the third parent role. It was never asked of me. I think just as the oldest, I felt the need to kind of step up to the plate and really be the glue of my family and take on a lot of responsibilities for sure. And as you can imagine, this definitely started to take a toll on my mental health. And I found myself at a very young age having symptoms of depression and anxiety. But I also really struggled academically in school. School was never my thing. And I just think, when I was in elementary school, I really felt the weight of the world and really struggled. But I am very, very lucky where my parents created such a safe environment for me growing up that I felt comfortable to talk about what I was feeling and get myself that hope. Therapy was something that was really helpful for me. And I've learned that kind of with me having depression and anxiety, and then later on realizing I have ADHD, figuring out that what worked for me when I was 9 years old versus what works for me now as a 25-year-old are not the same. And kind of it's been a roller coaster of, this worked for me at this point in my life, but then it didn't work for me at this point. And it's definitely a really long journey of finding what works for you, but also accepting that it's going to change as you get older and as life changes. I, have always kept in the back of my mind that I am going to struggle with my mental health, and that's okay, especially kind of when life hits. But, being that I have struggled with depression and anxiety and the ADHD, and then also academically in school, speaking up for myself of what I needed was really important. And I think I learned that lesson when it came to middle school. My sixth grade math teacher, I'll never forget, always checked in on me, made sure I was okay, was seeing if there was anything she could do to get me to that finish line, and letting me know that if I needed to stay after school and do homework, if home was too stressful, that I could, stay after school, do the homework with her. If I wanted to take a test at a different time, that I could do that. And it really made me learn the importance of taking care for myself and advocating and speaking up for myself. And I was able to implement that all the way through college. Um, I went to Syracuse University. I was hours away from home. Being in a new environment, being by myself was a huge change for me. I was very lucky that I went to a school that had great mental health resources where I was able to start therapy again, but also meet with a psychiatrist to get myself on medication because I had never tried that and I wanted to try it. I wanted to see if it helped. And it really did. I was able to also advocate for myself to get accommodations academically. And I truly believe, if I didn't get myself that help when I was, 18 and in college and as a freshman, I don't know where I would be today. I am also super lucky that my school had those resources right there on campus was also something that was really important because being in a city like Syracuse, you have to drive everywhere. I don't know if I would have ever gotten myself that help if it wasn't right there on my campus. My journey has really been long, it feels like, but I've always just been able to push through and get through. And it's been really important to just keep moving forward and really just seeing that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know that that's really hard to share, but thank you for sharing that. And I know so many people go through anxiety and depression, and yet they feel so alone. They feel like they're the only ones experiencing this, and they don't really find people maybe that are willing to share their story. And you've done a lot of speeches, like sharing your story at a lot of different mental health events, also for different nonprofits and everything. I know we only met briefly, like when we had met, but I was so inspired to learn about your story. So thank you for sharing, because I think it helps people to feel less alone and like they are not the only one going through this. Especially that transition from high school to college is very different. Also the transition out of college, all these transitions, is just so important to hear different people's side of the story. And so you mentioned, between the physical struggles you went through when you were younger, the family struggles you had, the mental toll it took on you, also the transitions that you've struggled with, that again, so many people struggle with, and they think that that is just like, they feel so alone with that. But what's your message to people that are struggling mentally, emotionally, physically, maybe struggling with hopelessness? So what's your message to them? How can they start to really help themselves towards, greater emotional well-being, really?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember is that it's all connected, our mental, our physical, our emotional, and really knowing that it's kind of like a holistic approach. When you're taking care of one part of it, you're taking care of all of it, kind of.
That's true.
The biggest thing to remember is that whatever you're feeling, you're not alone. There are people that are feeling the same way you are. It's really important to speak up for yourself and also advocate for yourself. I know I say that a lot, but I can't sit here and tell you, Stephanie, like what you're feeling, what you're going through, and you can't do the same for me. So that's why it's so important that we speak up for ourselves, because I can't guess or assume what someone's going through. But to have these open conversations and normalize, especially the conversations about mental health, is so important, because you never know what someone's going through if you just have that simple conversation. Right now, I'm being honest about what I've gone through. I do that a lot in schools and in the community, and I truly feel that I'm creating a safe space by just sharing something as little as struggling with depression and anxiety. It really shows people that it's okay not to be okay. Here's someone that has gone through what they've gone through, but is standing here today. The biggest reason why people don't get help is because of stigma, whether that's with the mental health or with their physical health. For a lot of people that I know, they just they can't talk to their parents about something, or they don't have that friend to talk to about. And I always encourage people that if you're ever worried about someone in your life, the simple question, are you okay, or just checking in with them, can really change the trajectory of someone's life and, again, make them feel seen and that they're not alone. I think it's probably one of the biggest things for someone to do if they are going through something or is struggling.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Georgie. And, I think that's just the little kindness. It goes such a long way because, again, you don't know what someone's going through. And sometimes when we're struggling with something, we may think that it's noticeable. Like, wow, we have so much pain or so much struggle. It seems like it must be obvious that people notice, but I'm being real. Many people don't notice it, or sometimes people can mask their pain, and they learn that they live with it so long that they're masking the pain, and it's not noticeable to others. So I want to talk about how people can start again in small ways to really advocate for themselves and their needs, because again, this starts in small ways. I know that you've taken your advocacy to Capitol Hill, and we could talk about that later as well. But there's small ways that people can start to advocate themselves, as you mentioned, in the classroom, with teachers. And so, yeah, I want to hear your point on that.
Yeah, I think what you said is just really hit it on the nail of just speaking up for yourself is, I want to say, the smallest way you could do it. But I think you really need to kind of take a step back if you want to get involved with a community organization and advocate that way. Step back and kind of like think about what your values are, what you are passionate about, what you want to get more involved in, and do your research, find that organization. I think organizations are always looking for someone to get involved. And that can be as little as donating $1. That everyone, organizations always say, like, donate $1, it's going to make the world of a difference. And it really does. Like, $1 can go a long way, especially for the organizations that need it to make change happen, whatever that may be. And I definitely, I think I did that for myself. When I was younger, diagnosed with a brain tumor, there was this organization called Making Headway, and they were able to get my family through the difficult time of, me having a brain tumor, being able to answer questions, but really offer that hope feeling.
Yes.
And I knew how much that organization meant to my family and meant to me, and how they were such a big support system that all my birthday parties as a kid, I didn't want gifts. I wanted donations to this organization because I knew like something like that is going to make a difference in the world. And that may not be on a huge scale, but in my little world, it felt big to me. And something like a doll wasn't going to change anything. It was only going to really satisfy me. And just knowing that I could do something like that really was important to me. And then being able to turn that into the mental health stuff. I always struggle with mental health, and I definitely don't feel like my story is crazy or, is this huge thing. It feels very little to me, but knowing that to someone that has never spoken about mental health before, that is so big for them, for me to stand there and say that I have depression and anxiety and ADHD. So I would encourage people to speak up, think about what your values are, what you want to get more involved with, because advocacy can look different, like you said, in so many different ways. It could look like speaking up for yourself. It can just be as simple as educating yourself on something, fundraising, donating that $1 if you have it. You could also do it with social media. It's important to educate yourself and make sure that what you're putting out there on social media is, accurate, but raising that awareness is really important. But if you want to take it to the next step, you can directly communicate with your legislator. Their job is to, hear from you. So you can do that through, lobbying, writing letters, or even attending in-person meetings. So there's so much you can do. Oh, and also like protests and demonstrations, I think, are a huge thing that have been happening for years. That's another form of advocacy. So they can look different for everyone. And I think if you do any of those, again, it's going to make a difference. It may not feel that big, but you got to start small, and you could definitely work your way up.
And so let's talk about self-advocacy, like that you mentioned you both did, and your parents also helped you do as well. So what does that look like? How can people really get started with that? More so like self-advocacy, advocating for their needs, really, like I mentioned, like in the classroom, in the workplace, in the community. How can people start to really do that?
Yeah, I think knowing what your needs are really important. So say, you are someone like me who struggles a little bit academically. see, what your options are. When I was in college, my school had a office of accessibility, and I knew that if I went to them with my mental health diagnosis, that I could get myself what I wanted, but I knew I also had to speak up for myself what I thought could really help me get to that finish line of finishing each year and then graduating college. Being that I have depression, it is sometimes so hard for me to get out of bed, and I think I just have to accept that and take care of myself. So if I could get, a little leniency on missing class, especially if I have, a really bad depressive episode, or if it's okay, I was able to get time and a half and be able to take a test in a different room, which was really helpful. Yes. I had awful testing anxiety. I was always that kid that was more focused on what everyone else was doing during a test and not focusing on what was in front of me. But I would spend all my nights studying, and then the second I got to that piece of paper, it's like I forgot everything and just had that voice of anxiety of like, you know nothing, everyone around you knows more than you do, and they're going to finish faster than you. And that was really hard. So with self-advocacy, just knowing what your needs are and finding the resources to get yourself that help is really important. But even if, you're not in college and you're under the age of 18, speaking up with your parents and having them help you, whatever that may be, a doctor's appointment to, meet with a psychiatrist or a therapist, or even if you're struggling with your physical health, just checking in and seeing what is going on. It's really important to speak up for yourself because you know what you're going through and what you're feeling, and to really make those steps to get you that help and to get you through the finish line of school is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get into what was the advocacy that you did. You mentioned you went to Capitol Hill. Can you talk a little bit about that?
With making headway, I had the opportunity to go to Capitol Hill in DC and advocate with this bigger organization called the National Brain Tumor Society and advocate for brain tumors, which is something that I had never really done before. I really wanted that community with the brain tumor community. I had found it, in my little town with making headway, and I had found it with mental health, but I really wanted it on a bigger scale. And I thought it would be a really cool experience to do something like that, to be able to go to Capitol Hill, because you see it on the TV, you see it when you are learning things in school, and it just felt so big and so exciting, but also a little nerve-wracking. I did 1 year virtually by myself, but then the past 3 years I've been able to go with my mom. And actually this past year I was able to go with my sister too. She was able to join us in DC. But being able to find that brain tumor community has been something that's really important to me, but it's also been really hard. Something that, even though I was 5 years old when I had the brain tumor, I really struggle with survivor's guilt of the why me, like why me really is the bottom line of it. And
So what does that mean really for people that don't really know what that means?
The survivor's guilt or the why me? Yeah, so survivor's guilt is essentially, it could look different, in many different ways, but sometimes with an illness, you start to question, why is it that I'm kind of able to survive this and go through this? Why is it that all these kids die from a brain tumor and I was supposed to be worst case and I ended up being best case? So that is kind of like the overarching thing with survivor's guilt, is what us survivors feel. And going to, DC and going to Capitol Hill, I was able to meet so many people that were currently going through treatment, but a lot of people that had lost someone to a brain tumor, which is really sad because there's this brain tumor called glioblastoma that has a very small survival rate. And a lot of the families that come to this, what they call Head to the Hill, are families that have lost someone to a glioblastoma. And I'm very fortunate, that I didn't have that brain tumor, but again, it makes you question, like, why does this happen to some people? And, I'm very fortunate that it didn't happen to me. But that's why it's so important for me to speak up, because there are so many people that can't advocate and can't speak up because they're not here today. And I feel this sense of responsibility of being that voice for people. Having my mom there by my side to fill in the gaps has been extremely helpful. But it's really created a family for me with the brain tumor community. They divide us up by states, and New York State has really become like a second family to me. We have our group chat, we always check in with each other, and has really made me feel, again, like I'm having some purpose in this world and I'm doing some good. And just having that feeling of, with advocacy, it's really important to have the personal stories because that's what's going to create change. When a legislator gets a bill in front of them, it's just a bunch of words to them. It doesn't mean much. But when you have those people coming in with that lived experience, sharing their stories, and this is on every different scale, it could be with mental health, with brain tumors, with different kinds of cancer. Just having those personal stories is then going to make the legislators see that, or their staffer, whoever is looking at this, think about that person that shared their story of losing someone to a brain tumor, for example, and how this could have helped them if this was in place. And that's why it's so important to, if you want to advocate on a bigger level like that, it's important to have those personal stories. Again, there are so many organizations that need those personal stories in order to make that change happen. So I can't stress it enough that if you have a story, no matter how small it may feel like to you, it is big when it comes to getting legislation passed. And, I can't encourage people enough to get involved when it comes to all of that.
Wow, that's beautiful, Georgie. And, really, I love how you said that you're speaking not only for yourself, but also for the experiences of those who are not able to share their story. That's really beautiful. Thank you for doing that. I want to also ask, so tell us about maybe someone who hasn't heard clearly about these organizations. So when you go there, like when you go to Capitol Hill, tell us about like what type of work, like what are you advocating for, so to speak?
Yeah, so for the brain tumors, when I go to advocate for things on Capitol Hill, it's really for the extra funding. Brain tumors, unfortunately, are so behind on research. They've existed for so long and research has been done, but unfortunately for a lot of brain tumors, there's not a cure. And it's also so complicated because you are dealing with the brain. So just having that extra funding for research to have that cure is something that is a big reason of why we go. And also the awareness part of it. Not a lot of people know that, something like a glioblastoma is, the survival rate is so low. And it unfortunately is I know it sounds awful, but it is kind of like a death sentence. You know that you only have X amount of time to live because there's no cure for it and the treatments aren't that effective and it's just going to, come back if it does go away. But also, with the mental health part, a lot of the advocacy we've done was in the beginning. The suicide crisis lifeline used to be a 1-800 number. And now it's as simple as a 988. So it's similar to 911. And in order for that to happen, advocates needed to, speak to get that happen. And so being a part of that was something that was really cool. Advocating for the 988 number to be on college IDs because, like I said, college students are struggling. They're away from home. They're dealing with, different changes. And to have that number as a resource on their college ID to be easily accessible when they're struggling was something that was really important. So it always varies, but, I think the bottom line with advocacy is just awareness and change to be able to move forward, but also in the right direction of things is really important.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. How can people find their community, whether that's with their mental health struggles or their physical health struggles? How can people start to find those like community or peer support groups or advocacy groups? How can people start to find really their people?
Yeah, I think Google is your best friend for that, or social media. I think we're really lucky that we have those tools. And it's also really important that, we're using the tool of social media in the right way. We don't want to spread misinformation. But like I said earlier, look at what your passions are, what you want to get more involved with. Look it up, see what is maybe in your area. I think doing, so for me personally, working at NAMI Westchester, we are a national organization, but as NAMI Westchester, we're doing the work in Westchester County on kind of like a smaller scale, I guess you could say. So, if anyone is looking for mental health support, NAMI is a great resource. They are all peer-led, which means, people that are leading the support groups have been in your shoes before that completely get it. Same with, they have family programs. Something about NAMI is that all their resources are free. So, they don't take insurance. And I think, with the world that we live in today, having those free resources is something that's really important. But as a student, your schools have so much resources. No matter what grade that is, your school is going to have a counselor. If you're in college, they'll, maybe have a psychiatrist or a therapist you can meet with. But really take a look at what the resources are in your community is really important. NAMI has a helpline, so you could always see, with your local affiliate, what the resources are available to in your community. I think also, with social media, finding a community online has been something that's really important for people. I know that, there's lots of Facebook groups you could join or Instagram accounts you could follow. I think finding that community is really important, especially if you're feeling that you're alone in a situation, just remember that you're not alone. And there's a community out there of people that are going through the same thing and that are going to uplift you and support you and get you through the hard times. I think that has been the biggest thing that I've found with NAMI is that when I was younger, I did feel alone. I didn't think anyone my age struggled with their mental health, but I was quick to realize that a lot of us struggled, but we were too afraid to talk about it. And that's why it's so important, with NAMI, this Ending the Silence program, which is what I started, and sharing my story in schools and the community, showing them that, they're not alone, that it's okay not to be okay. But especially with the younger kids of, here I am today, and this is all I've accomplished. And, that light at the end of the tunnel is so important because when someone, especially, for me on my darkest days, when you're in that hole, you can't see that light at the end of the tunnel. So just remembering that sometimes you're going to struggle and things are going to be hard, but you just got to motivate yourself and push through has been really important. So finding that community is really going to make you feel that you're not alone.
You're stronger than the struggles that you are going through. Yeah. And that's a really important point about how you bring the program to children, because children are not going to verbalize and say, well, I'm facing this or I'm facing this. Maybe their parents see that they're exhibiting symptoms or signs that are unlike themselves or concerning. So do you speak to parents as well with that?
Yeah, parents too. Yeah. Parents, school staff, pretty much everyone.
Yeah. Wow. You've took the pain that you've had and let that fuel your purpose, that you understand others, what they're going through. You know how the stigmas that are existing and how hard it is for people to seek help. And you want to go on and give help and guidance to others. So what's your message to people that are struggling, feeling alone, as you said, or struggling with feelings of hopelessness, really?
Yeah, I think at least for me personally, I think hope has always been the guiding light. Like you said, I feel like I've been through a lot, and it's really tiring when you hit rock bottom and you just feel like, when times are tough and you've hit rock bottom, it's just easy to give up. I don't know who said it, but I think it's in a movie, but when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way, and that's up.
Heard of that.
But, I unexpectedly lost my dad, and that was really hard. And that felt like I hit rock bottom. And I just remember thinking to myself, when is this going to stop? I'm tired of just having all these things happen to me. Again, that why me question. Why does everything have to happen to me? And I think that was a really dark time for me. But I'll never forget, again, probably one of the worst days of my life. And when I had found out that my dad had passed, I was in school, in class. I was in a very public place, and dealing with that in a public place was really scary. But I was very fortunate that one of my professors had seen me and saw I was in distress and kind of sat with me. But, when I was on the floor in this hallway, hysterically crying because my dad had just passed, a stranger came up to me and handed me a pack of tissues. And they had told me, whatever you're going through, I'm sorry, and I hope it gets better. And again, one of the worst days of my life. But I always think about that stranger, and I will never know who that person was to this day. But I really associate that moment with that stranger that gave that random act of kindness, that really reached out and offered me that hand of I see you, I see you're going through something. Here's me trying to help. And I think that's really important for us to do. Random acts of kindness. You never know what someone's going through. It could be as simple as holding the door open for someone or smiling at someone, because when you are feeling down and you feel like no one cares, no one sees you, and just having someone open the door for you or smile at you really makes you feel like, okay, this person sees me, they care. Here's them making a step to kind of try to make my day feel better. And I think that is the biggest thing, is that you, again, I can't stress it enough, you never know what someone's going through. And just to be a kind human is so important. I think especially in the world that we live in today, there's so much hate. And just to be that positive ray of sunshine for someone is really important. And I think, for me personally, surrounding myself with people that are going to uplift me and are going to support me has been really important. I remember when I was younger, anytime that I shared, what I was going through with my mental health, there were some people that were like, ew, what's wrong with you? Like, you're a freak, you're crazy, and used all these stigmatizing words. And I learned to cut those people out of my life, because that is not a true friend. True friends are going to uplift you. Someone that's going to kick you when you're already down is not a true friend. And I always say I'd rather have that one solid friend than a million fake friends. I don't, it's so important to surround yourself by people that are positive and are going to uplift you and make you happy. And I think I've done a really good job at doing that. I have very supportive friends, but most importantly, I have a supportive family. My parents have been really good at creating, this family that's made up of all their friends, and they're people that I turn to before anyone. Having self-compassion for myself, just accepting that I'm gonna have a bad day once in a while, or, my depression's gonna kick up on me. Just practicing that self-compassion, but also that gratitude, is something that's really important. On, my hardest days, it's really hard for me to get out of bed or shower. And I know that sounds really silly, but I know if I could at least move to the couch, or if I could at least, go to the mailbox or something silly like that, being proud of myself for those little things, achieving those little things, is gonna make me, again, just keep on pushing through. Being proud of yourself is something that's really important. Just be proud of yourself for those little small achievements is really important. If you're having a bad day, if you can get out of bed, that's something to be proud of yourself with. If you get a good grade, of course, be proud of yourself for that. But, when you fail, know that once you fail, that you're going to be able to work up from that and do better. But grades aren't also everything. I think that's important to remember. Is like, I think as a student, I felt that grades were everything. And now I'm 25 and I couldn't even tell you what I got in senior year of high school or even college. They really don't matter. It's definitely not the end of the world. But motivating yourself is something that's really important, and just reaching out for help when you need it. If that's to a friend, a family member, a teacher, someone at your school, just reach out. But also reach out to the people in your life. Ask them that question, are you okay? Check in with them. If you haven't heard from someone in a while and you think they may be going through something, see if they want to hang out. One of my best friends just sent me the other day, like, the importance of having a couch friend. Having that friend that you could sit on the couch with and watch TV and be perfectly fine in silence. People get uncomfortable when things are quiet, but having that friend you can just sit with in silence is so important too. So it really is. I know that was like a long answer, but there's so much.
There is. I know that's great advice. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I didn't know that. Kind of like what we were talking about, like with the grades and like those little things that we're stressing over. And then we realize when we, in hindsight, that wow, those things are not important. And caring for yourself and your health and those around you, that's really what matters most. I like the self-compassion piece a lot. I always like to say, when it comes down to like active listening, like really wanting to listen to someone when they do open up, like you said, your friends had made fun of you when you opened up and shared your struggles. And I mean, that's terrible, firstly. But in terms of being a good friend for someone, I always like to ask this question where, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to help? Like, do you want to just vent and I listen to you through that and be there for you in that way? Or do you want me to actively take steps to help you? Because sometimes we just want someone to listen and vent to. And other times we want someone to kind of walk that walk with us in whatever way. And that's the best way to help someone, is to ask them. As we go back to really with advocacy, it comes down to yourself and your needs best. So ask them, what do you need? How can I help you? Supporting someone who's going through a really hard time, I think that makes a world of a difference.
Yeah, and I think helping someone when they're having a tough time, again, is going to change the trajectory of that memory. Again, I associate one of the worst days of my life. I always think about that stranger that offered me that helping hand. So just being that person for someone is really important, because it's going to help them see that light at the end of the tunnel. but really make them feel that they're not alone and that they can get through what they're going through.
Definitely, yeah. There's a movie actually. It's called
Oh,
Pay It
really?
Forward, and yeah, and it's a really
Okay,
beautiful
I have to
movie
look at that.
over, the kindness you receive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not able to give it back to that exact person, but pay it forward for someone else. You have this idea that the universe will repay you in some way, but really giving to
I hope.
someone and not expecting anything in return. I really like that. Well, if you were to say what were the top things that helped you overcome the struggles that you faced?
I think, when I was really struggling, the biggest things for me was really surrounding myself with people that, again, that were going to uplift me. I have a
Mm-hmm.
very close relationship, with my mom and my sister, my brother, my dad. And so just, having a conversation with them, like a heartfelt, like conversation was really important for me. My mom and I love doing what we call couch time. And that's just like sitting on the couch and watching a show together, knowing having someone by my side has been something that's really helpful for me when I'm struggling. It really helps me feel like that I'm not alone. But, some of the things that I've tried to do is deep breathing has been really helpful for me. Also, fresh air is something that's really important. I love just being inside. I'm such a homebody, but
Me
fresh
too.
air really helps. It really helps, especially when it's nice out. Taking a little stroll. Sleep is really important. I find that, if I'm having a really stressful day, just taking a quick, 15, 30-minute nap can really help my mind know that,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like everything's going to be okay. Just like here's a little brain break for you. Because sometimes when I'm really struggling, my brain just feels like it's on overload and I just want to shut it down. So sleeping is something that's really important, but making sure
Yeah.
if I'm going through an episode of depression, making sure I'm not sleeping too much, because then that's easy for me to, not be productive. But keeping in mind those things that motivate me, what can I do to make myself feel a little bit better, is something that's really important, and are things that I try to
Yeah.
implement in my everyday life. I think the biggest thing though for me is surrounding myself with positive people and doing fun things. But even like just sometimes I want to sit on the couch and watch a movie or sit on my phone, and I let myself have those days because I know that sometimes that's just what you need, is like to be quiet with
Yeah.
yourself and sit in your thoughts. A while was saving a folder on Instagram of like uplifting videos or quotes, and sometimes going through that on my bad
Mm,
days was something that was
I
also
like
really
that.
helpful. Yeah.
I really like that.
Sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I think, the biggest thing for people too is seasonal depression, especially with
Oh yeah.
the cold weather coming around. A lot of people don't know about seasonal depression. So I think educating yourself on that is also really important, of knowing that, sometimes when the seasons change and the sun isn't out as much, people find that that really affects their mood, gets them into these depressive episodes. I definitely think going to a school like Syracuse,
Mm-hmm.
it was a big thing. Seasonal depression was a big thing because it was always cold
Mm.
and snowy,
Yeah. Really.
and I mean upstate New York, it's like not great weather. So a lot of people
Mm.
struggle with seasonal depression, but they don't know what that is. And for them, they don't
Yeah. That's
realize that they
true.
are struggling, and that's why sometimes people don't get help. But that's
That's
why it's
true.
also, it's again so important for us to normalize the conversation on mental health, because having those little conversations is going to really make people realize maybe I'm struggling with my mental health.
I know we spoke about hope a little bit, but I really
Yeah.
want to hear from you about, so what role has hope played in your journey and how do you hold on to it today?
Yeah. Um, I definitely think that hope is the guiding light. I think it's the reason why I keep going and I do what I do. My family is really the reason why I do everything that I do. They are what motivate me, and I kind of see them as like my hope. Like I love being able to see like, my siblings achieve things like graduating school and getting jobs and just little things like that. But I think, you know, again, just really keeping in mind when I'm having my bad days that I'm going to get through what I'm going through. I've
Mm.
been through so much. I'm going to get through this. And sometimes, I'm stressing about the littlest things, just reminding myself that I've been through worse. I can get through this. But keeping in mind, the positive coping strategies has been really important for me. Hope has really become my motivation for things, making sure that those small steps that I take are going to go to a bigger picture, whatever that may be. I think for me personally, holding on to hope and holding it on to today is just really being proud of myself for achieving those little things,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm having a really tough time. I think that really gets me going and motivates me. Hope is just, knowing that things are going to get better, no matter how
Mm-hmm.
bad it may seem, that, you know, there's so much life ahead of me. I think at 25, I feel like I really struggle with feeling like everything is the end of the world and that the life I'm living now is the life I'm going to live for the rest of my life. So knowing that, bigger and better things are going to happen is really important. And knowing that for me, hope is just that feeling of I have a lot ahead of me and a lot of great things are going to happen.
And that hope just emanates from you, honestly. I'm just so
That's so
happy to
sweet.
speak with you today. I really like your message because it resonates with people who are struggling. Hold on. And because you have so much ahead of you that you have not yet seen or you have not yet heard.
And I do love
Yeah.
that. It's crazy because I always think about, when I was going through the college process, I was between two schools. And I always think about what happens if I ended up at that other
Mm-hmm.
school? I wouldn't have met the amazing people that I made from college.
That's
My
true.
college friends were such a rock for me, especially my freshman year when I was going through the struggles with my mental health. They were really able to kind of get me out of my room and get me to go eat or get me to go to a football game. And they were really helpful. And I always think about like, what happens if I didn't have those friends? Some of my best friends are my friends from kindergarten. And I always think about, that was right after I had brain tumor surgery. What happens if I couldn't start kindergarten on time? I know that there's so many people I'm going to meet in my life that I'm going to love that I just don't know yet. Which is so crazy because I feel like it's the end of the world. Like,
That's
I'm sure
true.
you feel that, like, at our
That is
age,
so
you
true.
feel that it's the end of the world and that, again, the life you're living now is the life you're going to live for the rest of your life and that you don't have things figured out. And I know I don't have things figured out and I know that's okay that I don't have things figured out.
Mhm.
But sometimes it's really frustrating. Like, I want to know the meaning to life.
Exactly, exactly.
I
And I
would
just
love
think
to.
knowing like that the point we're at right now, and especially, that definitely resonates with people that are listening that are like, this is going to be like this forever, this is permanent, or anyone who's facing struggles, there's this sense of like, it's hard to see the other side and you believe that it's
Yeah.
permanent. But knowing and hearing from people like you and other people that I've had on my podcast, what it really does is it just shows that people have gotten through and you will too. You've survived all of your bad days. At this point right now, you've survived all of the bad days. Why can't you survive the ones
One
coming
more.
up?
Yeah.
So, and not to say it lightly, because I know that there are some extremely hard things that people are facing. And I know it's hard to say that, but you will get through this. And
Yeah.
so, and especially people facing mental health struggles, as we talked about, there's so many people facing it. There's more than you think. Listen to people sharing their stories like Georgie and take away the message that is hope from them. And they're examples of getting through on the other side and making that breakthrough and also going on now to help others. And there's purpose in that, as you mentioned. So there's great purpose in that and meaning. So yeah, this has been really great. I really resonate with what you said about going on and being the voice for people that are maybe not either ready to share their story right now or don't have the space to share their story or are not able to share their stories. What you're doing is very inspiring. And I hope that someone listening out there, if there's something you could take away from this, because I definitely did. It's really been great, Georgie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me the platform to share my story. It's really important. And then again, second what you said, I really hope people can listen to this and reach out for help if they need it, or even reach out to a person that they feel that may need the help. Let
Of
them know that they're
course.
not alone.
Of course, yes. Thank you. And thank you for making
Thank
people feel
you.
like they're not alone. If this message has resonated with you, please be sure to like, share, subscribe for weekly episodes, and click the bell so you get notified when I release a new episode. And leave a comment down below letting us know what has been your favorite piece of advice. Thank you for listening and have a fabulous day.